Welcome to Scandal Water, where the tea is hot and the conversation lively.
Your hosts, Candy
And Ashley
will discuss a peculiar story somehow related to the entertainment industry. This podcast might not change the world, but it just might satisfy your thirst for an intriguing tale.
Oh, it's that time of day. Tune in and hear what the ladies say. It's time to bend your ear when the silver screen appears. Stories about the stage and screen and everything in between. So come on and join the fun. The curtain opens in 3, 2, 1.
Morning, Ashley.
Good morning.
It's a holiday kind of day.
It is very much so.
For you guys at home, we are actually recording on St. Patrick's Day.
Yes.
And we're celebrating.
Yes, we are.
We are. I'm wearing a shirt that has the state of Kentucky.
It's really cute.
Oh, thank you. But it's comprised of little shamrocks, little green shamrocks.
Uh-huh.
And why don't you tell them what you're wearing?
I am wearing something that comprises my personality. It is a green shirt, and it's got the dinosaur from Toy Story, and it says, "I'm a nervous Rex."
Very cute.
Very cute. Do you know that one of my, I guess this would be one of your fun facts about yourself, I can find a 4-leaf clover.
Really?
I found.
You have that skill?
I do, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can spot them like in a big field of clover.
Well, I mean, not with an eagle eye, but I'll be walking along and I'll look down and I'll just see a 4-leaf clover.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, if you are listening when this show is being first released, it is a different holiday. It is actually April Fool's. And I was going to tell you, Ashley,
April Fool's is not really St. Patrick's Day. No, it is.
I had this idea in my head.
What?
I was like, oh, you know what? We'll start out and we'll say we're very excited that we have this guest and we're going to be Zooming with Sean Astin. And I just thought it would be so lovely.
If you did that to me, I would lose my mind.
Well, I was thinking about doing it to our listeners. And then I was like, so they would have already seen the title of the show and the description.
Yes.
So not much of an
Not
April
much
Fool's
no.
joke. Yeah.
No.
So let that go. All right. Well, here we are.
Admirable try.
Yes. Yeah, it was a good thought.
It was a good thought.
But we are talking about a fun topic today. We are starting a new month, which means a new theme. And ooh, this one's going to be juicy.
It is.
So, you know what? Rather than tell everybody, let me start with this little tidbit. Back in 2002, TV Guide put out their list of the 50 worst TV shows of all time.
Stop.
I'm not even going to have you guess because honestly, there are a lot of these that we've never heard of, I think, or
okay.
you would never guess.
Okay.
But I'm going to read the top 10 to you.
The top 10 worst? So would this
Worst
be the bottom?
of all, yes. In other words, the very worst. The
Worst.
10 worst of all
Okay.
time. And then I'm going to have you react.
Okay.
Number 10, Hee Haw Honeys.
I've never heard of that.
That was a takeoff of Hee
Spin-off
Haw,
of Hee
yes,
Haw?
where it was, I think, just the females had
okay.
the main parts.
Okay.
Number 9, You're in the Picture.
Never heard of that.
Me either. Number 8, Cop Rock.
Oh, I have heard of that.
Okay.
I think I saw an episode of that.
Really?
I mean, when I was little, I watched everything, so.
Yeah, and this list is from 2002, so these are going to be dated.
Okay.
Yes. Number 7, After MASH.
Nope, not.
Number 6, Celebrity Boxing.
What? No.
It sounds terrible.
It does sound terrible.
Now this surprised me. Number 5, Hogan's Heroes.
What?
I know. Okay. Number 4, The Brady Bunch Hour.
Well, that seems mean. They seemed very wholesome. Why are we picking on the Brady Bunch?
Number 3, something called XFL.
I don't
know.
what that is.
All right. Number 2, My Mother the Car. I know. And you're going to
You
know.
can't, that's impossible. Your mother can't be a car.
Well, it
Unless
can
you're a-
according to some old TV show,
Unless
apparently.
you're also like your little bug, and then your mom was a station wagon.
You're going to know number 1.
Is it what we're covering today?
It is.
Stop.
Go ahead and say it.
Jerry Springer Show?
The Jerry Springer Show.
It's the worst.
The single worst TV show of all time is what it was named. So I thought that would be a fun way to introduce this.
That is fun.
Our theme this month, guys, is Talk to Me. We are going to be focusing on different aspects of talk shows, and we are starting with Jerry Springer, who has been very, very closely associated with the rise of what's been called trash TV.
I was going to say trash TV, yep.
Yeah. Now, I do want to put this disclaimer out there, especially doing this research.
Yeah.
It has come to my attention how beloved Jerry Springer has been by so many people, and his show had high ratings and a lot of people watching. So I do not want to make people angry.
Yeah.
But he's also been called names like the Sultan of Salaciousness.
Wow.
And while people will clarify, if you read multiple sources. They will say, he's not the one who invented this stuff. He's not the very first one. He's not the only one out there who was doing it. But many, many sources will refer to Jerry Springer as the pioneer. His show pushed boundaries that other shows.
He didn't invent the Oregon Trail. He just was the first one on it.
They pushed boundaries, they did things other shows hadn't done, and they were so successful at it that he is very strongly associated with this, what would you call it? Genre of trash TV. So we are focusing today on the Jerry Springer Show. Now, I will remind you, in case you want to go check it out, we actually mentioned Jerry Springer briefly during our 90s episode. Okay. We were talking about the rise of reality TV, and he came up as part of that. So if you want to go back and check out our 90s episode.
I liked our decades episode.
It was good. It was good. It came out last May, and it was called A Better Pastime Than Listening to This 90s Episode. As if. So go back and check that out. But to introduce the Jerry Springer Show to you, I'm going to play a brief clip from his interview on Meredith Vieira's talk show, which took place something like 9 years ago. It's been a while.
Okay.
But she was asking Jerry about some of his most famous episodes. And as he comments on one of those famous episodes, you're not only going to get an idea of how outrageous some of his topics were, but he also offers a little behind-the-scenes glimpse into how his show worked. So I think you'll find this interesting. It's about a minute long.
Because as great as your shows are, I like the titles just as much. So I'm going to read you a few of the titles from your shows, some shows you've done, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind, all right?
Okay.
But I need a little music. Want to set the mood?
Oh.
The first one happens to be, it's a real title from one of your shows, I Married a Horse.
Well, this actually happened. I'm not allowed to know what the show's about. So they hand me a card like yours, which I carry, but all my card has on it are the names of the guests.
I didn't know that. I never knew that.
Oh, yeah. And then I'm supposed to ask questions that you would ask sitting at home watching and then make jokes.
Okay.
But I never know what the subject is. So on this particular show, we got this guy, Bob, sitting there. I'll say Bob. I don't remember what his name was. Bob, what's going on? That's always my first question. And he says, well, I'm having trouble with the neighbors. What's the problem? Well, they don't like my wife. What's wrong with your wife? I don't know. She doesn't make any noise. She doesn't talk to anyone. So this is going nowhere. So I figure, this is boring. I look at the next name on the list, and it says Pixel. Well, let's bring out Pixel. And out comes this horse. Now, God.
Are you putting it together at this point?
No. I'm thinking that his wife fell off the horse. You don't think, oh, gee, that's his wife. So I'm going, oh, my God, someone check backstage. And then the producers start yelling at me, no, that's his wife.
Oh, my gosh.
Ooh, thoughts about that, Ashley?
That was ridiculous. Although it is interesting to me, did that continue through the entire run of the show where he didn't know who the guests were?
That was their format.
Really?
They would try to surprise him with what the angle was going to be, and he would just react.
That's like when we first started our podcast. You were going to try to surprise me.
I was going to try to surprise you, and he would just go with it. Yeah.
Wow.
I know. We're actually going to come back to that particular episode later, but I thought it was very interesting. Gives you a little taste, right? Ashley, did you ever watch this show? Was it one that you watched?
Oh, I think I did. I think I saw that, and I also remember watching Maury Povich because of the You Are Not the Father. I remembered that.
You like those segments?
No, they had caused me huge amounts of stress, but it was still like, oh, that definitely is not the dad or something. You'd make your own guess about if it was or wasn't. But that's what I'm sure I've seen it. I'm sure. But then they started getting in fights a lot, right?
Oh, yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
They definitely did. I'm going to say I was not a fan.
Well, yeah, of course not.
No, I was not a fan. And I understand that lots of people were. It was not my thing. But every now and then when you caught an episode, it would be like a train wreck.
Yes.
You could not look away because it would be so sensational.
Ridiculous and silly.
Yes. And
I think I would have liked it better if it had stayed ridiculous and silly. When they start fighting and being mean to each other, that's when Nervous Rex comes out. And I can't, it just makes me uncomfortable. It makes me feel, ugh.
Yeah, I didn't like it either, I'm going to say. So, but this is going to be such a fun episode. And before I go into it, I do need to give a shout out. I used many sources in preparation for this, but one of the sources that was most valuable was the Netflix documentary Jerry Springer Fights Camera Action, which is out
That's a cute
right
title.
now. It was very clever. Yes, but it gave so much great information, including interviews with key people who were on the inside of the Jerry Springer show. For example, some of the producers who worked on it in those early days, and the executive producer who's going to come up a lot as we go through this. In fact, I'm just going to give you a little heads up that basically people are calling him the mastermind behind the show's success.
The producer?
The executive producer, yes. But let's go back to the beginning, all right? Despite the fact that Jerry Springer, for decades, has been known to a lot of people, as we said, as the Sultan of Salaciousness or the King of Sleaze, he actually had very impressive beginnings.
Yeah, he was a mayor, right?
Yes. A People magazine article that was published after his passing shared this.
Wait, he's dead?
Yeah.
No, when did he die?
Yeah, he passed away back in April of 2023. He was 79.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jerry.
And it was a very fast thing. He had pancreatic cancer, so it was diagnosed and then he
no
passed pretty
idea.
quickly afterwards.
Aw.
Yeah, so it was a brief illness. But after his passing, of course, there were many
Tributes and
tributes and things that came out. One of those, this People magazine article, gave this little summary. After a brief stint as a lawyer in the late 1960s and political ambitions that peaked with him being elected mayor of Cincinnati in 1977, Springer pursued a career in media. He began in 1982 as a political reporter and a commentator at NBC's Cincinnati affiliate, WLWT. Springer spent nearly 10 years at the news station, helping revive their ratings and earning recognition for his commentary work.
Cool.
So he was a serious reporter, a serious politician, and he had a reputation that he had also developed for being a nice guy. Like he was
good.
respected for his
Yeah.
work. He was respected as a person with this strong background and interest in politics. Of course, as we've said before in our 90s episode, it was a big time for talk shows. Lots of new talk shows coming on the air, and they decided to give Jerry Springer his own show. He went into it with every intention of having it be a
serious?
reputable,
Yeah.
intelligent, news-focused show.
That got out of hand quickly.
Well, actually, it didn't. It took a couple years.
Did it?
Yeah. It premiered on September 30th of 1991, but as one of the interviewees on that documentary pointed out, nobody knew him. Like he didn't have
why
a
would they
name.
even give him a talk show?
I don't know. Maybe his background as that news
Maybe.
reporter and a politician,
Or
maybe
being a
that helped
mayor,
him.
yeah.
Who knows? But they said his show was unremarkable. One particular commentator said, nothing made him stand out, especially when you compared him to the flood of other talk shows that were coming on the market.
yeah.
Oprah, of course, by the way, was the
She
one to
was-
beat.
yeah,
She
yeah.
was queen of the market throughout this time period. Her show was killing it. But Jerry Springer's show was performing so poorly that after a year or two, stations were moving it out of the regular programming time slots and picking times like 1 o'clock in the morning. And it was basically on its way to being canceled.
Yeah.
Right? So this is around the time that a man named Richard Dominic came into the picture. He had actually been working on the Jerry Springer Show for a while, but he was promoted to executive producer in 1994 when the show was really kind of dying, to use my own word. Richard Dominic had a background working for sensational tabloids.
Tabloids, okay.
And he had a reputation for being outrageous and being a showman. And according to a Parade magazine article, quote, Dominic started out in tabloid journalism, working for the outlets Weekly World News and Sun, churning out sensationalistic articles like Toaster Possessed by the Devil.
Whoa.
Yes. So, Richard Dominic convinced Jerry to change the angle of the show from what Jerry intended it to be, news and politics, to sensational topics and an approach that would make Jerry more likable. They wanted him to be this host that came across as
Affable.
yes, exactly. Make your jokes, be fun and easygoing. And so, according to, again, that same People magazine article, quote, Richard Dominic played a key role in shaping Jerry Springer's controversial format and ushering in an era of confrontational talk programs.
I hate the confrontation.
Yeah. In fact, from the very beginning, Richard was all about we've got to get higher ratings by coming up with things that are sensational, things that are outrageous. Another producer who was interviewed on the documentary was this lady named Annette Grundy, and she said that Richard told them, don't bring any topic ideas to us if it would not be interesting to watch this play out on the screen with the sound off.
Oh, he's looking for like Shakespeare level stuff.
He wants, from the beginning, he wanted stuff that would really grab people's attention. So this documentary, and actually all the sources you read, say that this guy, Richard Dominic, was so intentional about every move that they made to try to get the ratings. For example, when he took over, control of this, he was the one who instigated having the crowd stand up and chant, Jerry, Jerry. Yes. Because he said, this is going to give the impression to the viewers at home that everybody really loves this guy and he's famous. So he thought everything out. He, by the way, did offer several sound bites on the documentary. And he said, this was his word, he wanted to make the show more sexy. And he thought that it was really important that Jerry had such a good sense of humor and such great timing because those helped as he was trying to revamp this show. That same producer, Annette Grundy, said that the audiences loved the outrageous antics when they started bringing that onto the show. But she pointed out they also loved Jerry.
That's good.
Yeah. She said that she thinks it was that formula that saved the show. And she went on to clarify, everybody who worked on the show loved Jerry. Everybody talked about how nice and easygoing he was. But on the other hand, this Richard Dominic fella was described by the producers who worked under him as being scary and very demanding.
Ooh.
One person called him a hard taskmaster. From their perspective, these producers, Richard controlled everything. One of them commented that Jerry must have either liked what Richard was doing or was just content to go along with it because it was being successful.
Yeah, I'm thinking the second because I wonder if he regretted. Did he ever say if he regretted the way his show went? Like, okay, so you're famous, but you're kind of also ridiculous.
We're going to come back to that question later. That is an excellent wondering, and I had the same one.
Okay.
So when Richard Dominic started instituting these changes, ratings skyrocketed.
Well, yeah,
so
especially
much.
it's the first time this has happened.
Well, I mean, a few other shows were being sensational too, but this just really started grabbing people. And so stations started moving the show back to daytime, but would also leave it on at 1 a.m. or whatever other time it had. And so that actually worked for the show.
Double dipping.
Yeah, exactly. And that meant higher ratings still. And then once they were soaring in popularity, then it became a situation of, well, how far can we push the boundaries?
Right. Now I'm wondering if they were making up stories. Like the dude that married a horse. Did he really, or did you just stage that?
Well, that particular storyline, I believe, is absolutely true. But the question of whether things were faked or scripted will come up in just a bit because that became a big thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that became a big thing. But back at this point, that was not an issue yet. So what was an issue, especially for the producers, was that they were the ones who had to get the guests. They had to fill every day new guests.
That's a lot.
I don't know exactly how many there were, but I think it was a handful of producers who had to find a way to get...
Not just guests, but like wild guests.
Exactly. They had to be sensational. They had to be outrageous. You had to keep topping what you've already done. And they said the pressure was intense.
Yeah.
They tried to get people by putting out calls. They would call for people. If you have a story, call into the show, whatever. And then they would also try to go find people and recruit them. But it was so demanding, so stressful for them. It came up so many times on that documentary. Now, one of the most controversial episodes aired in 1997, and it was called Clanfrontation. I know. An LA Times article summarized the episode by saying this, quote, Clanfrontation. The late Irv Rubin, chairman of the Jewish Defense League, faces off against several white-cloaked members of the Ku Klux Klan. Fists fly, chairs are thrown, and even some audience members storm the stage in a maze of mayhem.
Oh, that sounds terrible.
It was, because I saw a little clip of it. It was awful. In fact, on the documentary, they are reflecting on that episode, and they cut from one producer who says it was horrible. They cut to the next one. He says it was vile. They cut to Richard Dominic. He says it was brilliant.
Oh, wow.
So that shows you
that guy's
exactly.
man.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Their ratings went through the roof.
Oh,
if he was only going for ratings,
Yeah,
it
he
was
got it.
brilliant because he got it. The show execs realized that the audience really responded to the primal nature of fights, as you were saying.
Yeah.
So now it became a goal to set up every show to have
It's
some
almost like a
type
wrestling
of
ring.
they wanted some type of confrontational situation in every show.
Jeez Louisa.
I know. So it was around this time, 1998, that the show also started taking a lot of heat. The Jerry Springer Show had started to become the focus of a lot of negative publicity, including editorials that criticized the show, as we've said, as trash TV. There were also protests and boycotts against the show, with a priest named Michael Flegger, who served as one of the prominent leaders of that movement. So this fellow named Toby Yashimura was one of the other longtime producers from those early days. He talked on the documentary quite a bit, and he said that, get ready, this is going to hurt. He said that, remember, they would recruit people, but a lot of people would also call in and they would have to listen and find the sensational stories, and then they would get those people to come in, right? He said 75% of their guests came from a small area they called the Springer Triangle.
What?
It included parts of Tennessee, Ohio, Georgia, West Virginia, Arkansas, and Kentucky.
Of course.
Yeah, I know. I hated that. But he said because it was primarily small town people who would come in to be guests on the show.
It's like the people you interview after the tornado, right?
In a way, yes. Yeah. But he said it was easier to appeal to them with offers of things like
Big city stuff.
Yes, they would get them. They would kind of, in a way, lure them in, and they would give
Exploit them.
Yes, thank you. That's the word we're coming to. They would give them free transportation and lodging. We're going to send you to the show in a limo. He said they would sweet talk them when they were on the phone with them. They would make them feel like they had the most amazing story in the world to tell. Oh, you need to share this. People are going to need to hear this. This is so important. And he said they would try to disillusion them of the notion that Jerry was actually going to help them, because that was never the goal of the show. It was never like, you're going to get help. You're never going to get anything out of this. It's, you've got an amazing story to tell. You need to come on the show, or this is your opportunity to work something out with someone or to confront someone, right? Now, in terms of sweet talking them or treating them well, sometimes they would even encourage them to go out and drink or party the night before. One time at least, a guest said they paid for it. So I don't know if it was on the show or not, but they really set them up.
Yeah,
right?
they did.
Right. Now, it gets even worse.
Oh, gosh.
Before the taping, the guests would get, quote, springered, or basically produced. They showed clips of this. You can see it on the documentary. These guests would literally be coached on what to say and how to act. Toby, this producer, Toby, admitted that they would actually manipulate the emotions of the guests. They would get them to role play. They would encourage them to, oh, you know, are you going to, if they say this, are you going to let them say that? You know, what are you going to call them? And they would, like, in their role playing, they would encourage them to badmouth, to throw things, to confront. So it was definitely rehearsed or encouraged, I guess you might say, to go to a more emotional level.
Yeah.
Right? And again, this was all about increasing the ratings.
Not about the people, about the
Not
ratings.
about the people, about the ratings. And they got them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at what cost? At what cost?
Right. So we come back to the episode I Married a Horse that we referenced just a bit ago. It aired in May of 1998 and was immediately banned from a number of markets after it came out in the first location, New York City. And that show did receive a lot of criticism, but a huge segment of the population also came out supporting Jerry and the show, and the ratings came in. It was the first time that he actually bested Oprah.
What?
Yeah.
With this episode?
Well, in this time period, this episode helped it. Okay. Everybody came in like supporting Jerry, and
in what way were they supporting him?
Well, I mean, they would do interviews, the news reports would come out, and people would say,
saying that he's a nice guy.
We love the show. The show's great. Why are they picking on Jerry?
Okay.
People are watching it. People are tuning in. Yeah. A Cincinnati Enquirer article says, quote, after 7 years of being on air, the Jerry Springer Show rose in ratings in 1998 and took down daytime primetime juggernaut Oprah Winfrey, becoming the first talk show in more than a decade to beat the Oprah Winfrey Show.
Wow.
It dethroned Winfrey's program for 26 consecutive weeks.
That's a long time.
It really is. And nobody thought you could approach Oprah's show in ratings, let alone beat her.
Best her.
So it was huge. Richard Dominic called Jerry Springer a cultural icon and a phenomenon at that point. I mean, during this time period. And he was also apparently very lucky, according to this producer, Toby, because even a sex scandal in 1998 didn't hurt Jerry. The incident involved a guest and her stepmother, and Toby commented, if it happened today, Jerry would definitely be canceled. But back in 1998, the story didn't get much media attention, in the U.S. anyway, and it faded away pretty quickly.
Oh.
Yeah, but once the show hit number 1 in the ratings, things got even harder.
Because now you have to sustain it.
Yes. And it's constantly trying to top,
Yeah.
They said, these producers, that Richard's stance was to get the ratings or you're gone, right? So remember, the producers are the ones having to find these guests. And Toby commented that he and the other producers realized it really was very simple. If the episode did not contain fighting, it was not going to get the ratings.
Man.
Yeah. And Toby said these were real fights and they were brutal. He said teeth would get knocked out. This is, graphic just for a second. Tune out or skip forward 30 seconds if you want to hear this. People would literally have chunks of their hair ripped from their head. He said women would, in the fight, have their fake nails and their real nails kind of like get ripped off, and they might have to, some of these people would have to go to the hospital to get some treatment. Like, he said these were not fake fights. These were legitimate.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But along the way, there were different times when people would question if the stories or confrontations were fake. And those accusations became even more widespread during this time period. In fact, I saw it myself. I saw a clip where David Letterman had Jerry on the show and he asked him about it right there on the late night show. But because the show had such high ratings, it also brought in high ratings when different media outlets tried to give the inside scoop on what was happening. So you had, Jerry Show is defending themselves. No, it's all real. But you have things like Extra, the Extra TV show, who would do things like bringing on a group of former Springer guests and ask them to share their personal experiences of what happened when they went on the Springer Show. And these people would say, yeah, we rehearsed beforehand. Yeah, they encouraged us to throw things or to confront.
Which I guess is a little bit true, because you said they coached them on what to say and how to...
100%. So this fueled the rumors that everything was scripted and fake. Now, Jerry would get asked about it a lot, and he would basically always say the same thing. He would say that they insist the stories be truthful and real. If any of the producers were not adhering to that, they were gone, because everything was supposed to be raw and real, because, that was the strength of their show. So this leads to this one incident that producer Melinda Chatmali told about. She said the pressure on them had become so intense. They had to get these guests. They had to make sure the outrageousness was higher, and they needed to vet more carefully because they needed to make sure that, that this was real.
That they weren't going to go on Extra right afterwards and say, yeah, it was fake.
Exactly. But she said that she was so burned out, she couldn't keep up with it. She was so stressed out that one day she messed up. She said she had booked 3 guests, 2 men and a woman, to do a simple love triangle story. And she said, she commented, she should have known better because they were from Boston and none of their guests were from Boston.
Oh dear.
But when the 2 men started brawling, it was obviously fake.
Oh no.
One man would swipe past the other one's jaw, and even though you could clearly see there was no contact, the other guy would whip his head back as though he had been punched, and they would do things like this. And it was so clearly fake that she ended up getting fired. Oh. And then, of course, that the media frenzy about this, everybody was saying it's all fake, it's all scripted. And it did not do Jerry's reputation as being kind of the king of sleaze any favors either, because now they're saying, well, it's not even real, And then something even more sensational and tragic happened. But why don't we pause and take a break first?
Okay.
And then we'll come back and talk about that.
Okay. We love including listener voices in our episodes, and we're always looking for more. So tell us, where do you sip your scandal water? Do you catch up on the tea while folding your laundry, sitting at your work desk, Working out at the gym? Let us know by sending in your shout out, telling us your first name, your hometown, and where you are or what you're doing when you're listening to Scandal Water. And you just might hear a voice you recognize starting one of our upcoming episodes. Email your audio clip to scandalwaterpodcast@gmail.com. The voice memo app on your phone will work just fine. Cheers.
And we are back.
You left me on a cliffhanger. I really don't know what's next.
Well, we're
But
going
it
to
sounds
spend a
sad.
little.
You're doing your sad face.
It is.
Okay.
It's sad, and it's sensational and tragic both, to be quite honest. And the documentary spent quite a bit of time on this, and it is something that is all over the news sources. Once I start talking about it, you're probably going to remember
I
this.
don't know, but go ahead.
Well, it's awful. It really is. But I'm going to go into a little detail here
Okay.
because I think this is really an important story in terms of what happened with the show.
Okay.
So, by the way, a lot of the story comes from a man named Jeffrey. He is the son of this woman who's involved in the story. Her name is Nancy Campbell Panitz, and I'll probably just call her Nancy a lot. Okay. So he tells on the documentary what happened when his mom, Nancy, appeared on an episode that was recorded in May of 2000, although it did not air until late in July of 2000.
Okay.
Because, if you think about it, just like us,
Yeah,
you
sure.
record things in advance, right?
Yeah.
So Jeffrey started by first saying it was really shocking when he found out that his mom wanted to go on the show, because he said it was totally out of character for her. She was this really quiet, sweet, unassuming woman. She wouldn't even get her picture taken a lot of times. She just didn't like to be in the spotlight at all. And she was a widow who had raised him and his brother. She had 2 sons. And he said the whole time that, he and his brother were growing up with her, he doesn't even remember her dating more than like a couple of times. She lived a kind of a quiet life, right?
Okay, yeah.
But then in the late 90s, a friend introduced Nancy to an AOL chat room, and there she met a man named Ralph Panitz. And a year later, Ralph emigrated from Germany to the U.S., and they were married. Okay. Now, Jeffrey said that after a domestic violence incident where Ralph threw his mom on the floor and she hit her head, she filed for divorce.
Okay.
But Jeffrey believes that with Ralph gone, and you know what? Let me pause for a second. He's from Germany. It's RALF, so it might be Rolf, but
Okay.
I'll just call him Ralph just for
okay. Yeah.
sake of continuity. But with him gone, Jeffrey thinks that Nancy just got lonely in the house, and he suspects that's why she went on the show, that she went with the purpose of trying to reconcile with her ex-husband.
Oh, no.
Now, he says his mom had been led to believe that Ralph had been deported to Germany and the show was going to pay for him to return to America, at which point they were going to have this conversation and hopefully reconcile. Nancy knew that Ralph had a new girlfriend, but thought appearing on the show would be her chance to try to win him back. But Jeffrey said, quote, she was basically lied to because that never happened.
Yeah.
So the title of the show, which of course Nancy did not know, was Secret Mistresses Confronted. Okay. So when they are taping this show, which by the way, I saw this clip, okay, the studio audience is jeering and applauding while Ralph reveals on air that he had secretly married the girlfriend a month ago. So the main point of the episode was not what Nancy thought it was going to be. It was actually for Ralph to surprise Nancy with the news that he's remarried, they're over, and he publicly dumps her.
Yeah.
Jeffrey said, this is Jeffrey's thinking, he thinks the producers hoped the 2 women would not only verbally fight and
But
yell at each
physically
other,
fight.
but also physically, right.
Yeah.
But instead, I saw this, Nancy got up and she calmly walked off the stage.
What's she going to do?
Well, hang on. She was told, and the producers commented because they're giving commentary. We're cutting back and forth from different people's perspective, but they admitted that they tried to manipulate guests to stay, right? Because a
Yeah.
lot of people did not, once they saw what was happening on
They
that
wanted to
stage,
leave.
they wanted to leave.
Yeah.
But the producers would say, "Hey, we're not going to pay your way back home. We're not going to pay for that plane ticket, or we're not going to get you back to your hotel or whatever if you don't finish taping this show."
Oh, yeah.
She didn't care. She started walking, and she's walking through Chicago crying, finds a bus station. She has no money, but finally a good Samaritan bought her a bus ticket. She made it back home. And as far as Jeffrey said, he knew nobody from the Jerry Springer Show had ever called to check on her, but she made it safely back.
Okay, good.
Okay.
So she hears this news. She stands up, walks out of the studio. They try to stop her, but she walks through them, just keeps walking.
She's done. She
She's
did
done.
not
She
finish
gets
that
on a
show.
bus and goes, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Now, despite what happened on the show, somehow a month or 2 later, Nancy and Ralph end up getting back together.
What?
I know. And Nancy put money down on a house. But there was another domestic violence incident and they split up again. And when they did this time, Ralph wouldn't leave the house. Instead, he kicked Nancy out.
Oh.
So Nancy retained a lawyer named Lisa Kleinberg, who also spoke in the documentary.
Yeah.
Lisa shared that as far as she knew from the history of these two, that there were actually several allegations of domestic abuse. It was probably a pattern. And she was absolutely convinced that this time there was going to be no going back on Nancy's part. She thinks Nancy was determined it was over for good. And of course, she also wanted her house back because she was basically living out of a car, right?
Yeah.
So in July of 2000, they went to court. Nancy basically wins, right? She is granted full ownership of the house, which it was her money that paid for it, right?
Yeah.
And a restraining order was issued against Ralph. And the lawyer commented that Ralph appeared to take it well. As they were leaving the court that day, he seemed resigned. He didn't appear particularly upset. He was very calm, basically. But she went on to say that after leaving court that day, he went to a bar. And this happened to be the very day that the episode was released, where he and Nancy and the other woman were on that show. And Lisa said, that's the lawyer, that he watched the entire episode as he continued to drink and become increasingly agitated. And at some point, he said to someone in the bar, "I'm going to kill her."
Oh no.
She was found strangled and beaten later that night. Jeffrey said a police... skip again if you don't...
I did not know.
You did not know about this?
No.
Okay, well, skip ahead 10 seconds if you don't want to hear this. But Jeffrey said a police detective told him that someone had choked her, pushed her down, and stomped on her head.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Now, the producer Toby said that when the news first reached the Springer team, he remembered at the workplace one of the coworkers saying to him, "Oh, it's our worst nightmare," and telling him that the lawyers were already on the way. The Jerry Springer show ended up in the middle of a huge controversy over this, and I don't know the details, but I think they went off to Jamaica and did some episodes there, and they speculate that the reason the show went off to Jamaica was to avoid anybody having to speak about it, anybody being subpoenaed and being part of this trial. But I will say, Toby defended the show and the producers, basically saying, what are we supposed to do? I mean, people tape something and we're supposed to follow them for 2 or 3 months. That was their take on it. And another producer said something similar. He said, we can't be responsible for people's lives 2 or 3 months later. But to move on, ultimately, Ralph was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. And the judge also, in the comments, when telling the sentence, included some very, very strong comments about the Jerry Springer show. In fact, this is a tiny piece of it. She said that the 3 people involved had been, quote, manipulated by producers of the show. And then also said, are ratings more important than the dignity of human life?
Yes.
Shame on you.
Yes.
Yeah. So this caused some changes to happen. The show started having more restrictive limits placed on what it could air. And Richard commented that the show started to become mediocre. Toby left. He came back, left again for good in 2008. Richard stepped down himself in 2008, but the show continued on without the high ratings, but it continued on until it was finally canceled in 2018.
Wow.
I had no idea it was still going.
I did not either.
Richard commented that it was, again, mediocre. And
That sounds like it's like
it
20,
didn't get the
25 years
same
of this show.
media attention, yeah. But even after it was canceled, Jerry Springer stayed.
Yeah, he's on reruns, right?
Right. Well, he stayed in the public eye. I'll put it that way. He continued to pursue a few other projects. Like, for example, he starred in a show called Judge Jerry for 3 seasons. And he appeared as the Beadle in season 8 of The Masked Singer. But as we said, he did pass away in 2023, April of that year, at age 79 of pancreatic cancer.
He died only 5 years after the show was canceled.
Yeah.
He didn't have much life without the show.
You're right. Yeah, it was a huge part of his life.
Armchair psychologist.
But that brings us to the armchair.
Wow, I thought this was going to be fun, lighthearted, laughy.
Surprise!
Now it's just like, geez, Louisa.
I know,
Oh my gosh,
I know.
that's horrid.
It was awful. It was awful. Yeah. Okay. Well, so get ready because it's not going to get any lighter now. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. What is it?
All right. So again, I want to put this disclaimer out there because I understand there are a lot of people out there who are very fond of Jerry Springer. And many people credit him for being part of a cultural phenomenon.
But is it a cultural phenomenon that we needed?
Right. Okay. So you lead me into my question.
Okay.
There are also, of course, a lot of people who view the show and how it was run in a very negative light.
Yeah.
One of the underlying questions of the documentary, which you've also alluded to as well, is this issue of whether or not it's fair that Jerry is viewed as being synonymous with the concept of trash TV and the willingness to exploit people for the sake of money and ratings. Okay?
Yeah.
On the one hand, not just on the documentary, but in sources, you will hear people talk about Jerry was this kind uncle. He was an everyman. He had a great sense of humor. He believed in free speech. That was something he would say a lot when he was asked about the show and what it was doing. He would say, I'm going to always defend the right to free speech. That was his main retort when people would criticize it. He would also be self-deprecating. For example, one time when he was asked about the difference between himself and Oprah, he said, she does a real talk show. I don't do a talk show. I do a circus. There are just no lions. He would say things like that. In fact, I'll give you one more example. In 2008, he was giving the commencement address at his law school alma mater, Northwestern University, and he made this little joke. I've been lucky enough to enjoy a comfortable measure of success in my various careers. But let's be honest, I've been virtually everything you can't respect. A lawyer, a mayor, a major market news anchor, and a talk show host. Pray for me. If I get to heaven, we're all going.
Oh my goodness.
On the flip side, you have many people who feel the same way as Chicago media critic Robert Feeder. He also spoke on the documentary. He expressed his belief that Jerry Springer was complicit in everything that happened and that he allowed the guests who came on the show to be exploited. Towards the end of the documentary, he said, quote, the pact that Jerry made with Richard Dominic was a bargain that really caused him to sell his soul. And I believe that he knew every day of his life that what he was doing was really beneath him and beneath his dignity. So I just threw a lot at you.
You did.
But what's your opinion about...
Well, the quote, I do not remember who said this, but isn't there a quote that says, all that's needed for evil to prevail is for good men to say nothing?
Yeah.
So that's sort of what it makes me think of. So it does sound a little bit like he started off being a person who was trying to do things the right way and it just wasn't working for him. So it sounds like a little bit of a Faustian bargain with, I'm going to give you my personality and my, loosely my soul for this fame. And then, God, that just, it's icky.
It is. It is.
Because, in my mind, I saw it, but I didn't, because I didn't like confrontation. I wouldn't have watched a lot. It just was at the corners of my mind as something just fun, just silly, fun, entertaining. But when you dive into it, this is depraved.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Yeah. I'm going to say that Jerry knew what was happening.
Yeah.
I mean, and I can see where he would have been able to justify it. People loved it. People are supporting this. The ratings are high. Everybody else seems to think this is okay. It's free speech. And I feel like he probably in his heart tried to tell himself like, this is all good. This is all okay. But I don't know how you couldn't see the exploitation. I don't know how you couldn't see how people were getting hurt because they're physically getting hurt in front of you. When you have people going to the hospital, and how can people leave a confrontation when their relationships and their lives were basically blown up and you think that they're just going to go home and it's going to be okay?
Right, to say, well, we're not responsible for their lives for the next couple months, but you just imploded their life.
Right.
You tricked them, first of all. You got them there under false pretenses, which that feels illegal. And then you
manipulated
them.
the emotions and the confrontation so that it
and
would
then
be
send them home while you cash your check.
Exactly. So
again, with like you said, like with respect to people who like it, it just sounds icky.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I understand that there are lots of fans and that my opinion may not be everyone's, but in my personal opinion, I don't think it's right. I do think it was exploitation, and I think that Jerry went along with it. So if you're going to criticize the show, if you're going to criticize Richard Dominic, I think you have to criticize Jerry as well,
Yeah.
because
He's the face of it.
He's the face of it, and he knew it was happening, and he certainly took the success and the money from it. So I think you also
If you take the money, you got to take the criticism too.
you got to take the responsibility.
Yeah, the responsibility. That's a better word.
Yeah. Goodness, who are we going to cheers?
Nancy, the sweet people who were manipulated.
Yeah.
Like, we see you. We're sorry it happened to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Cheers to you.
Cheers.
If you love what we do, please rate and review our show or become a supporter through Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon. Whether a single gift or recurring monthly donation, your support is what allows us to keep the tea brewing.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast app or the Scandal Water Podcast YouTube channel, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Show notes are available at our website, scandalwaterpodcast.com, where you can also access the merch store and more.
This episode was executive produced by Candy Thomas, that's me, and Ashley Raymer Brown.
That's me.
It was researched and written by Candy Thomas and edited by Ashley Raymer Brown.
A special thank you to Josh Martin, who wrote, composed, and performed the Scandal Water theme and other music. Matt C. Adams, who created the artwork, and Joshua Reith, who designed our website and provides ongoing technical support.
As a reminder, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes. The thoughts and opinions of the host during each episode of Scandal Water are their own and do not reflect the opinions of any future guests, advertisers, or clearly professional psychologists. Thanks for listening.